time. Time is one of the top reasons to cause scales not to happen. We have no time. There is something more important, more pressing, and that's where we have to organise and prioritise and commit. Where have you heard that? Yes, it is OPC, which will be launching in January, but more about that later. The day has many, many seconds and minutes and hours, which I think we can all honestly say we can utilise and maximise more efficiently and more effectively.
Well, this is a pose that many would not often see me in. It is me doing my sit-ups, or my press-ups first of all, and I will go on to my sit-ups. Why am I doing this in the final video of the month of scales, which Paul Harris and Chris Jolly and I have come together to do? Why am I showing you what I do in the morning? What is the link between this and doing scales? It is about fitness. That's what it's about. And I thought this time I would take you through what I do, not only my physical fitness, but later on my scales. And the resistance that I felt this morning, am I going to do my usual routine of fitness? There is always resistance, but in the end, discipline won. And I come to the end of my sometimes 25, depending how my shoulders are feeling, and sometimes 30 of my press-ups.
There are lots of reasons that there is no time for scales. For me, right now, literally 3 weeks away from moving house, I have 85 boxes to pack. And there's some of the boxes which are not even ready to pack because I have to actually make them up. That is a very good reason to say, look, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a few boxes and get them ready for packing.
Hi, I'm Aria. I'm a clarinet player and also a midwife, currently on night shifts. So it's times like this where it can be especially hard to get any clarinet training in. Just be quite difficult working 12.5 hour plus shifts and getting anything else done on a personal level. I've just finished another great lesson with Victoria, and we were talking about how I managed to get my scales done during my training sessions when they are a bit harder because of work. I used to have a really difficult relationship with scales. I never used to enjoy them. I always would meet them with massive resistance. I would always put my barriers up. I would find any excuse not to play them. I don't like thinking of learning scales. I like to think of it as working them out. I always like to start a training session, which I know may be slightly more difficult because of tiredness or any other sort of reason. I like to start with a chromatic or a more familiar scale like an A major scale or a C major scale. And then I'll move on to the melodics and the harmonics. And I know how to work out a harmonic scale, and I also know how to work out a melodic scale. Working out how many sharps or flats are in a scale, I have my keyboard. I make it easy for myself. I make it so that I reduce the risk of becoming frustrated, of working out my scales, and playing my scales is much more enjoyable. And no matter how well I know a scale, I will always go from the very beginning. So using my prompts to work to, using the keyboard to work out how many sharps or flats are in the scale. Then we're going on to whether or not it's a harmonic or a melodic, working out how we're going to work out what will be in that scale based on the prompt that I have. And then once I know what I'm doing, I will then finger the names of the notes, before actually playing it, mould it all together, and then playing it at a good tempo is always a big help as well. It's made training much more enjoyable. It's made my scales much more enjoyable, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who's struggling with them. I don't know if I would ever be able to say I love scales, but I'm definitely in a much, much, much better place than I was previously.
Whether I'm thinking of finger position, something Paul spoke about, whether the pressure, also the coordination, particularly when you're tonguing and when you're fingering, and that despite the fact that I've been doing them over decades, my attention, and when we think about attention being part of the senses, and senses with touch is not just with the fingers, but it is actually with the tongue as well. So coordination, particularly when we're thinking about things with the mouth as we go up high, and coordination, as you heard perhaps fractionally, had, as I was going over the top, had slightly lost its focus because I was thinking perhaps of fingers, and I need to readdress letting my fingers be lower down the priority and thinking perhaps more about the oral facial or the tongue. So the instruction, the coordination, the fingers, the tongue, I've spoken a lot about that in previous videos. But what is important is the brain gym. It's a word that we hear less about, but I remember when it first came up, and while it was a very kind of, perhaps became quite overused, I actually really like the idea of brain gym, because it does really reflect how much the brain is having to think and jump around and and the fitness and the training of the brain latching in to what we are needing to do in our focus, whether it is to do with the fingers and related, whether it's the retrieval of the key signature, for harmonic, for melodic, whatever it is, and the tone, the support. There are so many things that we need to do in any one time. Doing my majors, my minors and my harmonics, I choose to do them in different articulations. To me, that makes the best use of time. And I've spoken about time and how we can almost use it in a very wasteful way, but conversely, we can use it in a really very, very powerful way to get as much as we can out of the time that we have to invest in whatever it is that we're doing. So you heard the majors, which I do tend to do slurred, the harmonics, which I've created, I will say, ever since I was a teenager, and I created this different way of articulation, and then the melodics. So within what we are doing, or what I am doing with my scales, my focus, my attention is directed in a very, very specific way. Training, fitness. There is so many benefits that you will gain, as I know I do, even though I procrastinate and I know it only too well. But I have to keep reminding myself and pulling myself back to overcome my procrastination, my resistance, the demands of the other deadlines, to pull myself back to doing my scales, my morning routine, or as one student used to call it, my morning ritual, because it not only benefits the fitness of me as a player, but it also benefits me psychologically. We are all musicians, and we must stay connected with our instrument and with the heart of what we do in pursuit of musical excellence.